say you, Congressman, about what's happening with Netflix right now is quite a interesting cancellation campaign being run by Elon Musk. And I think for good reason, because it's a totally morally indefensible what they've done when it comes to sexualizing children. And it seems like something that perhaps might require a little bit of oversight from Congress, because you can't be doing this. I mean, you can't show pornography to kids. Obviously, there are a lot of laws against this kind of stuff. And I think that there should, quite frankly, be some penalties when it comes to companies that are overtly putting sexually explicit content into children's programming for the purpose of having the kids absorb it when the parents aren't watching, right? Because the way Netflix works is it's just autoplay, right? And a lot of parents, they got to do their taxes. They put their kids down on the couch and they just let it go. And Netflix knows exactly what they're doing. There's a definition of propaganda, and it's also the definition of a sexual exploitation.
Absolutely. And one thing we learned during COVID, when we started looking over our kids' shoulders, there it is. And they tried to make it out, oh, it's an interracial couple. That's what you're upset about. I don't care if they're both unicorns. I don't think it's right for these cartoons to be showing a kid they're trying to transition, who's a little boy into a little girl. Look, you got tomboys and you got effeminate little boys, and you let them grow up, and they grow up to be citizens. And my mama was a tomboy. She flew an airplane during the Second World War, dadgummit. But she was a beautiful, loving mama, and she was wonderful. Her and my dad were madly in love. And it just drives me crazy over this thing. And I always remember in economics, though, I had a professor. One time I was paying attention because I didn't do too well. His name was Tony Spiva, and he was world renowned. But he talked about casting your dollar votes. That's where we got to start realizing what we got to do.
Yeah.
Cast our dollar votes elsewhere. Pull the plug. When somebody's advertising something, when the Super Bowl is having a devil worshiper who cusses our president, we need the sponsors of those, if it's a car dealership or a truck dealership, I don't care if you go to church with them, call them and say, we ain't buying any more. Y'all are sponsoring this stuff. And they're going, that's our corporate people. No, we're not going to do it. We're going to bring you to your knees because we do not support this. And that's what we need to do with Netflix. The parent companies, the corporate people, that's where we need to get it. And we're very short-lived. I remember 9/11, and I remember the day after, you couldn't get an American flag anywhere. I mean, everybody was buying, everybody hand over their heart during the pledge. But you go to ball games sometimes shortly after that, and people are standing around, people aren't standing up, they're not taking their hat off, they're not putting their hand over their heart. We got to stay in this fight. This fire that Charlie Kirk lit in this country, we've got to ignite it, and we've got to keep pushing. And we're all puffed up over a few college professors and somebody losing their job, but guess what? They're going to show up somewhere else, and they're going to be more refined. It's just like when we send a criminal to jail, they don't get reformed. They turn out to be a better criminal when they come out.
Yeah, it's interesting that you brought up Charlie there, because he was always about culture war victories, and it was constant. Every single conversation that we had at Turning Point USA, and I worked with them for 10 years, was about culture war victories. And yes, registering Republican voters is critically important. Yes, making sure that Republicans win is critically important. But what actually affects the politics of the nation is the culture. And so the end goal was to be able to pluck a Jimmy Kimmel, show out and say, no, you're just going to absolutely be punished for what you said. For the first time in the history of Hollywood, one of these arrogant liars, the high priests of the diseased temples of Hollywood, we actually affected their career. We are actually able to take them off there. And they lacked the cultural power to defend Jimmy Kimmel. They lacked the institutional power to defend Jimmy Kimmel, the regulatory power to defend Jimmy Kimmel. We were really able to show how weak they are right now. And I'm very glad that this Netflix cancellation is happening, because it's the same people and they're pushing the same type of ideology. I don't know if you have a Netflix. I doubt it. But do you think that perhaps, you do have a pretty high position in Congress, meaning a lot of people listen to you. You have a lot of followers. You get a lot of love. Would you be in favor of the Netflix leadership being asked to sort of testify over this
I would.
radical sexual
And
ideology.
every time we're on, I always say I'm going to do something that makes news. Here's what I want to do on this one, because the First Amendment and all that is involved in it, of course. Let's get on it. I'm going to follow up with my folks after we get off. I'm going to call them and say, which committee can they be brought in front of? Is who I think what we have to look at, who regulates the FCC, and then since it's cable, does that count? I don't know. I don't know enough about it, but yeah, they need to be brought in. We need to find out what their agenda is and why they're pushing this stuff. Because from what I understand, that little cartoon is apparently the #1 rated cartoon they have on their show. I haven't seen it. It looks kind of like claymation or something. I'm not really sure. But,
yeah,
I said something about it, and immediately the left pounded on me and said something about, oh, you're just upset because it's a racial family. And I know some gay folks, and they are getting a little more ticked off about the transgender situation because they're getting lumped in. That's not their fight. I don't think that's their fight. They need to pull off all that garbage. And because, they got their win, they got their marriage thing going, and nobody cares. Everybody's looking for a fight, and I live in East Tennessee, and nobody cares. Nobody cares. And just live your own dadgum life. I always tell people, don't put it in my face and don't tax me. And that's all I care about.
Right.
But that right there is recruiting. That is grooming. That is the worst of the worst, because they're taking young minds and they know they can do that. And there's some kind of evil, demonic thing going on in this country with this transgender thing. I know you're a believer, but I won't go into too much detail, but I had a person came in my office and said that their child was transitioning, and I was causing them to lose their health care. And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. What are you talking about? And he said, well, you want to cut out so they can get their drugs and get this butcher surgery that they want to do. And I said, nothing further from the truth. I said, when you're an adult, it's your business. I think it's a mental illness. And then I said, how did they get diagnosed that they were whatever, a man trapped in a woman's body or a woman trapped in a man's body, whatever it was? And they said, oh, they self-diagnosed on the computer. And I was like, exactly. I said, the Chinese and the devil are working hand in hand. I'm not sure which is which, but that is exactly what is going on. Is it a demonic thing? It's a power of suggestion. When I was growing up, you never heard about this stuff. It was such a rarity. My dad was a dean at UT, University of Tennessee, dean of student conduct. And I remember he brought something home, and it was a guy who wanted to come speak to they turned him down back then. Now they would probably kill the fatted calf for him. I don't know. But this guy was turned into a woman or whatever, and it didn't look like much of a man. He sure didn't look like much of a woman. And he was wanting to come speak at the university, and just how absurd we thought that was. And my dad always warned us. He said, what they do is, they throw it out at you, just the farthest realm, and then they pull back, and then they take a little bit. Each time they take a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And that's where we're at as a country. We're just wide open on this stuff, and we can't allow it. We can't allow it. It is complete indoctrination, and it needs to stop.